Welcome to another fascinating episode of Body, Mind, and Soul with our host, Dr. Jim Polikoff. Regardless of your age, our motto is you are never too old to be young. Now to our host.
This is Dr. Jim Polikoff, and thanks for joining me for another Body, Mind, Soul episode. Did you know you can beat disease by doing something most of you actually enjoy? Eating? Yes, you heard me correctly. You can eat to beat disease. In fact, that's the title of the best-selling book written by this episode's guest, Dr. William Li, spelled L-I. We are so fortunate because Dr. Li is a world-renowned physician and scientist, best known for leading the Angiogenesis Foundation. His groundbreaking work and discoveries have impacted more than 70 diseases, including cancer, diabetes, blindness, heart disease, and obesity. You may have seen him on Good Morning America, MSNBC, CNN, NPR, Rachel Ray, or perhaps you read articles about his amazing work in Time Magazine and the New York Times. He truly is one amazing man and doctor, and you're going to find that out rather quickly. So without further ado, welcome to our Body, Mind, Soul podcast, Dr. Li. It's a true honor and privilege to have you.
Thank you very much. I never set out to write a book, but when I started to express how foods can actually change our lives, I realized that food has such immediacy that a statement or a fact about food that can be beneficial to health really has implications that can be turned into action very quickly. And that's really what made me write the book.
Well, again, congratulations. It's very well written. I have so many questions, and of course, there's so little time. But first, you're a leader of the Angiogenesis Foundation. Can you just give us a little bit of an understanding of what the foundation's all about and your work?
Yeah, well, 25 years ago, I set out to, using a research background, I'm a physician, I'm an internal medicine doctor, but I'm also a vascular biologist. So I study blood vessels. And the reason that I got involved in this field called angiogenesis, it's a fancy word, but it really means something very simple. Angio, blood, genesis, how the body grows them. So how the body grows blood vessels is the field that I actually grounded my research in. And the reason it was so attractive to me, why I wanted to get into the field, was because it is a common denominator, blood vessels, common denominator in both health and disease. And although in the medical research world, there's great pride taken in specializing and looking at what makes diseases different from one another. So what people who study breast cancer, they're an inch wide and they dive a mile deep. Same thing with HIV, same thing with COVID. I actually took a little bit of a different maverick approach to my research. I was interested in what makes things the same, not what makes things different. And as a researcher, I felt that by inverting the formula, by looking at how everything was connected, perhaps we could gain deeper insight. So one of my mentors once told me, if you drain the Pacific Ocean, you'll actually see how all the islands are connected. And that's what actually was interesting to me.
Really? So if you drain the ocean itself, you're going to see all of this?
You'll see how all the islands are interconnected, because otherwise they seem like they're separated by gulfs. And so for me, I realized that there was a role that a nonprofit organization, which I created, the Angiogenesis Foundation, could really help to drive, steer, and power the application of the science of blood vessels to try to help overcome human disease. So if you were to pull all the blood vessels out from the body and line them up end to end and make a ball of yarn, that ball has enough yarn to encircle the earth twice. So as you can imagine, these channels, these tubes, these are the highways and byways of the body. When we breathe oxygen, these are the vessels of life that actually allow our cells and our organs to be fed with oxygen. When we eat food, these are the same channels that deliver the nutrients that we're actually eating. And so this blood vessel network is incredibly important. And so my organization, the Angiogenesis Foundation, is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to actually take what we know about blood vessels and figure out how to transform that into ways to actually better understand disease and how to treat it. So over 25 years, we've actually been involved with 41 FDA-approved drugs and devices, new biotech treatments for cancer, complications of diabetes, and even vision loss, blindness. And it was really through that journey, helping to develop biotechnologies, I had a kind of a eureka moment, which was understanding that the importance of coming up with better treatments actually could not hide the bigger importance to me of actually preventing disease in the first place. And when you're talking about prevention, you can't talk about drugs. You got to talk about something safe and available, and like food. And that's really how I got into food as medicine.
I see. So that led you to the food portion of what you do.
Exactly. Well, the other part that led me to the food part is that I've always been somebody that, they use the word foodie, right? So I do enjoy, I enjoy exploring new foods and I enjoy tasty foods. But really, when I was growing up, my memories of childhood were filled with these experiences of the foods from different cultures. I grew up in a multicultural city of Pittsburgh, and we had a folk festival, and my friends were, had backgrounds from Slovakia or Germany or Italy. And so I always realized that every culture has their own temples of food and beliefs in food that relate to their health. And that's something that always interested me. So when it came time to kind of converge these roads of food and health, I was ready because I had my research background on one hand and my kind of my street cred for drug development. But on the other hand, I had a very, very authentic appreciation of food. This is who I am. And that's really why I think there's something wonderful in terms of a message to deliver, is that you can actually love your food and love your health at the same time. And
well, that's why I was very interested, because so many people think you have to be restrictive in the foods that you eat. And what you're basically saying is you can enjoy what you eat and still be healthy, correct?
That's absolutely the correct message. And it's interesting because living and growing up in America, we think of healthy food as removing things from our diet. There's a stick and not much carrot, right? So the carrot might be the bathing suit or the wedding gown or whatever it is, that people are trying to get into. And doctors often scold their patients for their weight. How many people have heard from their doctor, dude, man, you need to lose some weight, and then doesn't really give you the answer how. Well, I'm a doctor, and I can tell you I had less than 1 month of education on nutrition in my entire career, formal education. And that's one of the deficiencies that occurs in our healthcare system, is that our doctors that we trust with our health are woefully undereducated.
That is exactly true.
So that's really one of the things that one of my missions is, as a card-carrying physician, I'm trying to up the game for healthcare by bringing information that can really help the lives of patients. Now, what's interesting about, loving your food and loving your health is if you go outside of the US to cultures that have food as a very important part of their life, let's look at the Mediterranean, or let's look at parts of Asia, or let's even look at parts of Latin America. It's a very different experience than what we have here in the US, where we equate the foods that we love with unhealth or unhealthiness. Whereas if you go to Italy or Greece or south of France or Spain, they equate the foods that they love with good health. And so so I was really interested in addressing that unusual gap and trying to figure out, what does science teach us about how foods can be helpful? Because obviously not every food is going to be helpful. So what are the ones that actually are, and what do they do for us?
Well, one of the questions that I have is, and it's an important question because a good portion of our audience, quite a few thousands of our listeners, are actually in the senior age group. And so even though you contend, I believe, that there are 200 health boosting foods that can stave off cancer, reduce your risk of dementia, beat dozens of avoidable diseases, but is this possible when someone has an aging body or a body that's gone over that particular ridge? Can they still benefit from the foods that you're going to be discussing?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, food isn't a cure-all, and there's no single food that's the magic bullet. And that's really the point of my book, but also the outcome of my research over 30 years, which is that when it comes to food and health, it's not just about the food. It's about how our body responds to what we put inside it. If we put something bad inside it, our body's not going to respond very well. It makes a lot of sense. If you are filling your car with crappy engine oil and crappy low quality gasoline, it's not going to do that well over a period of time. Similarly, our body being kind of an engine of sorts, when we actually put high quality foods into it, it's going to respond. It's going to pay us back by having a better performance. And that principle doesn't change with age. And here's the whole thing about aging. Like you have an older audience listening, okay, and that older audience would include you and I, right? So here's the truth. It's never too old.
You look too young, by the way, for that. Our audience can't see you, but you're a very young-looking doctor, so you must be eating definitely certainly right.
Well, it's never too late to actually have our bodies work on our own behalf. And in fact, all the health defense systems that prevent us from getting sick when we're younger are still firing on all cylinders as we get older. So we possess the capacity to prevent and reverse disease. It's not in the hands of a prescription pad. It's not in the healthcare system. It really largely sits in our own hands, in our own decision making. So, healthcare is too often thought of as something that happens when you go to the doctor's office or when you're going to the hospital. But in fact, true healthcare, and I speak this as a physician, is actually what happens between doctor's office visits. That's what we do for ourselves. We care for our own health, and our body does it for us.
Preventive medicine is what you're talking about.
That's right, is lifestyle decision-making. But when we're children, here's the other kind of wake-up call, is that we are starting, people say, oh, I'm 50, I'm middle age, I'm getting old now. We start aging from the moment that we are born. So it's all relative. When you're actually 1 year old, you're aging, like you're 100% older than you were when you came out, and so on and so forth. And so this process of aging is something that we've all been working with, dealing with, and our body's been handling all throughout our entire lives. So what I would tell you is that we have in our 50s and 60s and 70s the same capacity for our defenses to work on our behalf to keep us healthy as we do when we're younger. Now, when we're
even
younger,
though our metabolisms are slowing and we're fighting arthritic diseases and things of this nature, you're contending that you can almost start from scratch by eating correctly. You're going to be able to turn things around. Am I?
Well, we're
on
actually
the right track.
Well, it's not about sort of a miracle reversal. It's about actually having our body's health defenses do what it wants to do, give you better circulation, rejuvenate, regenerate, and repair our organs from the inside out. Have the healthy gut bacteria in our body help our metabolism, help our brain, help us heal. Having our DNA that's hardwired not only to be a genetic code, but to actually protect us from the harms of the environment, like fumes, like radiation from the ground and the sky. And also our immune system, of course. We now know that how powerful and how important our immune system protect us from viruses and bacteria on the outside of our body, in the outside world. But we also know that our immune system protects us from invaders inside our body too, like cancer. And so these systems work throughout our lives. And as we get older, there is a higher tax to pay for being alive longer. And so we have to just make sure that our defenses are actually in as good a shape as possible. And that's where food steps in. We can always make a decision every single day, usually 3 to 5 times a day is the number of times we usually encounter food, to be able to eat to support our health defenses and let our body help to help us live longer and better.
Now, I have a question. In plastic surgery, for example, a field I'm quite familiar with, there is a lot going on in terms of stem cell therapy, particularly for skin rejuvenation. Are stem cells also utilized in what you're doing in angiogenesis? I believe I read something about that, if I'm correct.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, let's define something about stem cells, because so many of us think about stem cells either as a controversy, with embryonic stem cells, and there's a religious component to that, or some of us associate stem cells with, that little box in the strip mall that you can have your joints injected in the suburbs. And I'm not talking about either of those, because the truth of the matter is that everyone listening to this podcast started out as stem cells. Well, when the sperm met egg in our mom's womb, we started out as a ball of cells that looked nothing like an individual. But over time, in over 9 months, stem cells literally composed who we are. Some of our stem cells said, let's be a face, let's be an arm, let's be a liver, let's be an ear, and so on and so forth until we were ready to be born. And at that point, we were ready to come out into the world, and all of us were left with some overage, excess stem cells, about 750 million, by the way, that got packed away like in a suitcase into our bone marrow. So basically, as we grow up in this world after being born, we actually carry around with us an extra reservoir of these extra stem cells.
Well,
and what do they do?
Oh.
They come out over the course of our lives in our bloodstream from our bone marrow, and they just kind of keep rebuilding things. So, if you're listening and you don't feel sick, partly it's because your stem cells are repairing whatever ails you on the inside. You don't even know it. And so our stem cells can rebuild. We know they work because our hair regrows, our skin regrows, our gut regrows. I always tell people about stem cells. Like if you were to ever eat like a really, really crunchy chip too quickly, you might scrape the inside of your mouth, and man, does that hurt, right? But guess what? The next day, it's probably repaired, and you're back to eating your regular food.
And those are your stem cells in action. Is that what you're saying?
That's your stem cells in action repairing. Yeah. So what's amazing is that although biotech companies are trying to figure out how to inject stem cells and engineer stem cells to repair the heart and the brain, and I've been involved with all of those processes, by the way, at the biotech side, I can tell you the body does it a lot better than any company can do. And foods can help to coax our stem cells out to do better, faster repair.
So you're actually saying, if I have this correctly, aside from whether or not we need this stem cell therapy, if we're eating the right foods, we can possibly actually get a jump on what stem cells injected in our bodies can do?
Well, that's right. Because in fact, ideally, if we treat our stem cells properly, along with other health defenses, we won't need to have that injected stem cell. Now, that said, there's some really, truly amazing things happening in clinical research, clinical trials with stem cells. But, having been a player, in the trenches, helping to develop stem cell therapies for real, therapies, the pharmaceutical type of the biotech approach, I can say that, we're still a far ways away from making that mainstream. But in the meantime, our body's been doing it since we were born. So why not take advantage of the system that's already been laid in place, paved, the road's been paved, and actually activate our own body stem cells. So there's an amazing number of foods that can actually help get the good stem cells going. And there's even foods that can actually target and to help us destroy bad stem cells in the body, because cancers actually grow and continue to become a problem in people's lives if you've already survived cancer because of baby cancer stem cells that there's no drug that can actually get rid of. But there are foods that have been discovered that can target cancer stem cells, which is amazing.
Stimulate these stem cells, as I'm assuming.
They can stimulate good stem cells, some foods, and there are other foods that can actually find and target and kill bad stem cells. So that's what's really amazing.
Now, what about diseases such as we just had a guest on recently regarding Alzheimer's and dementia? Can stem cells be effective in terms of, revitalizing those areas of your brain that are starting to fade or fail?
In the laboratory, we believe that's true. There's been an awful lot of research looking at how you regenerate or rebuild brains that have been suffering from degeneration. So neurodegeneration is really the breakdown of a healthy brain, and regeneration of the brain is actually what we'd be looking for. Again, this is lab research, and there are clinical trials that are being done for biotechnologies for stem cell therapy for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other diseases. It's very promising, very hopeful, but very far away on the horizon. Okay. Now, here's what's amazing, though. A couple of weeks ago, there was a research paper, a study published, looking quite amazing, looking at the medical records of 7 million people. That's a lot of people out of the Cleveland Clinic. And what they did is they used artificial intelligence to mine all the pieces that are found in the medical record. Okay, so far more than the human brain can conceive of. And then they compared that using artificial intelligence to 1,600 drugs that are commonly taken, that are out there that these people might have been taking. And then they looked using artificial intelligence at the diseases of aging that people are concerned about, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other diseases. And guess what they found in terms of a correlation? And this was a stunner when I saw this. They found that there was one drug that was correlated with a 67% reduction in the risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Really?
You want to know what that drug is?
Does it start with an A?
No.
Okay, it's not what I'm thinking of.
It's Viagra.
Viagra.
They found by doing this artificial intelligence, unbiased, just trying to see what the correlations are, mining 7 million people for all the drugs, all the diseases, to see if there's anything that pops up, okay, in this ocean of data. And they found that Viagra, sildenafil, actually is correlated with the reduction of Alzheimer's disease. All right.
That's amazing.
Why am I telling you this in a conversation?
I'm just wondering because I haven't seen a study published on that.
Oh yeah, well it came out about 2 weeks ago. Okay. So it's in Nature Aging. So Nature, the journal Nature being one of the most
the journal, correct.
The preeminent scientific journal. There's a branch of it that's on aging. Now, why did I bring that up in a conversation about stem cells? All right. So how does Viagra work? All right. Well, we know that, for erectile dysfunction, it does what your body wants to do, but helps your body do it better, which is to improve blood flow, right? So in your genitals, if you have better blood flow, you can address erectile dysfunction. However, what's really amazing, and it's, the little blue pill is actually one of the blockbusters, many people taking it. But what happens is that when you take that pill, it actually acts in the rest of your body as well. What does Viagra do? It is actually a type of medicine that helps your body generate something called nitric oxide. It's not laughing gas, which is nitrous oxide.
No, I'm familiar with nitric
oxide is a signaling molecule in the body. And it was so important as for our health that, in fact, the people who discovered how it works won the Nobel Prize in 1998. So Viagra works in the body by increasing our body's ability to produce nitric oxide. That causes blood vessels to dilate, not only in the penis, but in your brain.
That's amazing.
Blood flow.
So we need to get seniors on extra doses of Viagra. I can see that. I can see this coming.
and
I know I'm kidding.
But there's one step addition, which is that nitric oxide also recruits stem cells from our bone marrow to help regenerate tissue.
So that's the major benefit.
This is hot, smoking off the press research that's just been published.
2 weeks. I mean, I've not heard of it, and I am familiar with the publication.
And what I'm actually sharing with you is how a researcher like me would think about how could Viagra possibly do that? Well, it works by nitric oxide. Nitric oxide improves blood flow, better blood flow to the brain, probably is better for the brain. And because it recruits stem cells, it may actually help to regenerate parts of the brain. Back to your question about the stem cells play a role in Alzheimer's, I think the study might suggest in real life, with real life evidence, that maybe there is something to this. And so, like every kind of good medical research, one discovery leads to the work to actually make more discoveries. So this is, what I do is like drinking out of a fire hydrant. I mean, there's new information coming out all the time. And what's exciting is for me to be able to take a look at kind of discoveries like this and then think, okay, now maybe stem cells do work, but if stem cells might be useful, what about food? Are there foods that can stimulate nitric oxide? And the answer is beets and spinach can actually do that too. So now you get into the whole food as medicine world to start thinking about how could the observation that came from the 7 million person study teach us about how to think about new treatments that could be developed by biotechnology. And from
Did this study also incorporate foods that would be beneficial? No,
not yet. But I suppose that would be something they could mine in a database.
Well, I would think if you've got that database, that would be a very interesting, solution to some problems.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges of the electronic medical record, as robust as it can be, is that, remember what we talked about just a few minutes earlier, doctors don't ask people about what they eat. They don't record what they eat. So that would likely be a big gap in this database. But imagine if we got the medical community up to speed to be able to start recording what people are eating so that we have this in our database. You're absolutely right, Dr. Jim. There's an opportunity to really uncover more information about how food is already our medicine.
That is, this Viagra that you're talking about, this breakthrough, this could be an equivalent of the new aspirin, for example. When we finally discover the magic that can. Do you think there are other components? Where do you think this is going to go? I'm just curious now that I know it's only 2 weeks old, the published study, but where can this go?
Well, for researchers like me, it sets me off in a direction to think about how to design new studies. And because this was a 7 million person study, we might want to go back to the lab and design an experiment that's more controlled and smaller, and we can get into the weeds to really try to understand the mechanisms of, is this true? Could it work? And that's really how, medical research is not a series of breakthroughs. It's really like building a brick wall. I'm like a bricklayer in terms of medical research. You have to take one brick and you have to set it on top of the last brick. And there's a brick on the left and a brick on the right and a brick on the bottom. One brick at a time. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at somebody's life work, or when you look at the community's work, you have this incredible wall of information that gets built up. However, I will tell you another thing that's really amazing that this research study actually is a proof of concept of, which is, are there other drugs and other diseases that we should be looking at? And I can tell you that separate from this study, but other studies have actually shown a common diabetes medicine called metformin. Okay, it's an old school oral medicine to use to treat for adult diabetics. So many of your listeners may be taking it. Actually has been shown not only to be helpful for diabetes, but as a quote side benefit, not side effect, but a side benefit. There's been this incredible observation. It lowers the risk of dementia, also lowers the risk of heart attack, also lowers the risk of cancer. And so here, drugs are developed by the drug companies for one thing and approved usually for one thing by the FDA. But a medicine that we swallow is going to affect all of our organs. And so one of the things that I'm doing is asking, so what organs do they affect? How do they affect it? Does it help to activate our body's health defense systems? And if so, not everybody should be taking medications or needs to take medications. Right. Can we transfer that knowledge into not medicine, but food? Because that's something that's safe and available and is food is almost all upside.
So there's actually, what's interesting is I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, the correlation of Botox, for example. They thought Botox was only going to be, applicable to those with wrinkles and things of that nature. Now they are finding out there are so many other uses to Botox itself. And I suppose you're discussing the same thing. There are all these other drugs that people are taking that may have other benefits that we're not aware of.
Yeah, well, an aspirin a day was supposed to help you with lower the risk of heart attack in certain age groups, and we now know that it actually lowers the risk of colon cancer as well. So, they call the term is actually repurposing, and we can repurpose our medications, which is fine. But really, I think that still, if we can actually transfer that knowledge from the medicine cabinet to the pantry or to the refrigerator, it gives us a way, like nobody enjoys taking medicines. But if I told you that there was a way of actually activating nitric oxide in your body, which is similar to what Viagra does, and could potentially help your stem cells, and I told you it was through spinach. And I gave you a recipe for spinach, little olive oil, chopped up little garlic, saute it on a cast iron pan, squeeze a little lemon juice on it, a little pinch of salt, and chew that really well. And then I told you that your tongue's microbiome, the healthy bacteria in your tongue, will change the nitrogen in that spinach. So make sure you chew it like your mom told us to, our moms all told us to chew our spinach. It will convert that nitrogen into a form that when we swallow it turns into nitric oxide in our body, just like Viagra does.
So Popeye was on the right track.
Definitely.
but do you need with the spinach? And you were mentioning how with the olive oil and things of that nature. Do you need that combination of ingredients to accompany the spinach when it goes into your mouth and your body?
Only for its taste.
I see. So in other words, spinach itself really the common denominator. But if you want to add these other things to have it taste better, that's fine.
That's right.
But it's really spinach itself that's doing the work.
That's right. Now, that's not true for foods universally. So, for example, if I told you tomatoes have been studied in more than 30,000 men to look at their correlation with the risk of developing prostate cancer, right?
The lycopene aspect of it.
Lycopene has been shown to reduce the risk of prostate cancer in men by 29%, almost 30%. That's a pretty big reduction. And we even know the dose of lycopene that's needed. And it turns out to be about 2 to 3 servings of cooked tomatoes every week. Now, how big is a serving? A half a cup. So think about it. If you had to have 2 shots of tomato juice, or you had to have a little bit of pasta sauce, red sauce, tomato sauce for your pasta, half a cup twice a week, like that's nothing. That's very easy. That's very attainable.
You're right.
Now,
does it have to be cooked, or can it be put into a blender, for example?
It's a great question. So here's where cooking does matter when it comes to lycopene in tomatoes, because when you pick a tomato off a vine and eat it like an apple, you'll get good vitamin C. You'll get, lots of minerals and other good nutrients from the tomato. However, the lycopene, which is what we're talking about for prostate cancer, actually naturally occurs in a form that your body doesn't really absorb that well. So if you eat a tomato raw, about 80% of the lycopene runs right through you and you don't absorb it. However, if you take that tomato and you heat it in a pan, slowly simmer it, okay, for about 30 minutes or longer. So to keep the tomato from sticking and to really dissolve that lycopene, because lycopene is what we call fat soluble. So it's an oily kind of natural molecule. Put a little olive oil in it, okay, and now the lycopene will float into the olive oil and mix it around, and then the heat will change the chemical structure naturally of the lycopene into a form that our body loves to absorb. So now you take something that is only 20% absorbed. Now you flip it completely. Now it's 80% absorbed because you've cooked it. So this is an example, unlike the spinach, where cooking the food changes the natural properties in a beneficial sort of way. So there's no universal answer. Should we only eat raw food? Should we only eat cooked food? I think that people are so eager to oversimplify things. And this is why I think putting it back in the context of cuisine is exciting, because everybody can remember a dish that they grew up with that their mom cooked that makes them go, wow, I can't wait to eat that. Or a favorite meal or favorite food or something you always order off the menu. And my point is that if you can find something like that that's already healthy, that's a great way to actually get started on a healthier diet, by having the knowledge of what you like that is already healthy for you.
So what you're really saying is, for example, if you're having spaghetti, rather than just use a tomato sauce, go ahead and cook the tomatoes for about 30 minutes, put a little olive oil in it, and use that as a sauce. Now you're getting the full advantage of the lycopene in the tomatoes. Am I correct?
Yes.
Why not use it as a sauce rather than your typical tomato sauce that people pour out of a jar, which really is not that healthy?
Well, here's the thing. Anything that you can cook yourself with whole plant-based foods that you're controlling the ingredients is always going to be healthier. And I'll give you an additional interesting kind of breaking research kind of tidbit. When you choose your own ingredients that you're going to cook with, and I used to do this all the time, people would tell me, why don't you actually why don't you use organic foods? Because organics are better. And I used to be very skeptical about that. I don't want to pay extra money just because it says organic on the basis of the principle. I don't want to get involved with that kind of debate. I want the evidence. I want the science. Well, science is now telling us something really interesting about organics, which is substances like lycopene, or in strawberries, something like ellagic acid, which is a powerful antioxidant and can cut off the blood supply feeding cancers. It's in a strawberry. By the way, let's use strawberries as an example. So a great strawberry, the best strawberry you ever had, is part sweet and part tart. The
Correct.
Tartness comes from this natural substance called ellagic acid. It's a powerful antioxidant. It's a powerful way of stimulating your immune system. It powerfully protects your stem cells. It does all kinds of good things for our health defenses. Now, if you were to take an organic versus a conventionally grown strawberry and say, well, choose one. I would say, well, what's the evidence that one's better? Of course, I want the one that's going to taste a little bit better, but prove to me that the organic one is actually better. Well, so the old argument was, well, the conventionally grown one's got a lot of pesticides on it. And how are you going to wash the pesticides off the skin of this strawberry? Like, you can't scrub a strawberry. The skin is so thin. And so why risk it? But what have I told you that the new research says that the ellagic acid between conventional pesticide grown versus organic, no pesticides, is different. There's more ellagic acid, more of the good stuff in the organic. Okay. Mm-hmm. And why is that? This is the interesting thing. Turns out that in Mother Nature, when you actually have insects, pests, nibbling on the stems and leaves of a strawberry plant, okay, which that's what the pesticides are used to get rid of. No pests, no nibbling. All right. Plants look better. But in the organic one, the plants don't look that great because they've been nibbled on. The strawberry plant and the tomato plant and the coffee plant all react to the nibbling as an injury. And the wound healing response that the plant creates is to make more of these natural bioactives like ellagic acid. So as a response to the nibbling, it loads up the strawberry with ellagic acid. If you compare conventional versus organic is always going to have more of the good stuff. So
you're recommending organic, even if it's a few dollars or a few cents more, organic.
Well, listen, what I'm communicating is that I changed my mind because I was a big skeptic about organic before. But now that I realize you can actually have less of the bad stuff, which is less of the pesticides. But more important to me is you get more of the good stuff. That's the stuff that I want.
Right. So what's happening with the depletion of our soil? We know that's been heavily depleted. What happens to all these foods that are going to be so healthy for us now that they've come from depleted soil?
I'm really concerned about that. I was recently at a meeting talking about climate change and sort of the interconnectedness between our food, what we put in our table, and where it comes from, which is out of our soil. And I think that, we are all now waking up to this realization that what we do to our planet ultimately affects what we're doing into our bodies, because we are all one. I mean, we're all earthlings,
Yes,
every life form. And so that if we don't take care of our soil, and by the way, to take care of the soil, we have to take care of our atmosphere, because it rains and then it rains into the soil. And, when we flush the toilet, that's going somewhere. That's not going into the ether. Somehow it's getting back into our planet. We need to be mindful about what we're actually putting into the planet in the same way that we're mindful about what we're putting into our bodies. Now, I think for, a lot of listeners, they might say, oh man, look, I can barely keep track of what I'm doing for myself. Now you're asking me to take care of the whole planet. I'm actually not saying that we have to take on another job description. What I'm saying, it's the same job description. If we are mindful and be thoughtful and are ultra aware that every decision we make, when we go to a restaurant, when we go to the grocery store, when we go to the farmer's market, we are making a conscious choice that ultimately is going to be good for the planet and good for ourselves, or maybe not so good for the planet and not so good for ourselves. And this allows us to think independently and not just become kind of a slave to marketing that we actually hear about.
That's such an important message. I'm so happy that you've mentioned that. There is when it comes to disease, well, actually, Chapter 6 of your book is entitled Starve Your Disease, Feed Your Health. Now, how can we actually starve a disease, and what's the correlation there?
So all of us, including you and I, including the people listening to this podcast, and including the children of the people who are listening to this podcast, every person on the planet is forming cancers in their body right here, right now, because we're human. And because our human bodies are made of 40 trillion cells that have to reproduce and make more of themselves so that we're alive tomorrow and as we are today.
That's an amazing number, 40 trillion cells.
That's right.
Amazing.
So when those cells divide, replicate, copy, paste themselves, because we're all really making copies of ourselves every single day, right? That's basically how I always stay alive. Our cells divide. All it takes is for one or two mistakes that those 40 trillion cells are making, and bingo, you've got a tiny little, what we call microscopic cancer. Don't think of the word cancer as a scary term. Think about that microscopic cancer like a pimple, okay, that you can't even see. So it's sort of like a pimple on your butt, on your hind end. You're not even going to know it's there It's not going to bother you. And that's how cancers normally form. Cancer is actually a natural part of our existence. And yet we're so scared of it because, when people get diagnosed with cancer, the cancer is really huge. Well, here's the truth. The science tells us that cancers, microscopic cancers, cannot grow larger than the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen. It's about 2 millimeters in diameter, tiny, because these little microscopic cancers don't have a blood supply. They can't get food. They can't be nourished. They have no oxygen. They have no nutrients. So they sit there and they grow only about to 2 millimeters and they're stuck. Now you've got a foreign invader cell, abnormal, and our immune system, another health defense system, wings by, finds it, spots it like a cop on a beat, driving by a neighborhood and sees, kind of a suspicious character there and just picks them up and takes them away and gets rid of it. That's why most of us don't develop cancer more often, because our body cuts off the blood supply, tells those microscopic cancers, no way, we're not growing blood vessels into you. And then our immune system takes them out. So how can you eat to starve cancer? Well, some cancers become really tricky and they hijack our blood vessel system. They hijack our angiogenesis or blood vessel system by releasing these fertilizers that trick our body to sprout blood vessels into the cancer cells. So it's really hijacking. It's like getting into the cockpit of our blood vessel system and said, "Take me to Cuba," kind of thing. And so once the blood vessels,
that's where the starvation comes in.
That's right. Well, I'll tell you, I've done research on this. If you don't allow blood vessels to touch the cancer, it can't grow up. But the moment you allow blood vessels to touch that cancer and feed it, that microscopic cancer will grow 16,000 times in 2 weeks' time. Huge. It's a trigger. Think about what that means. If you can help the body starve that cancer so those little cancers can never grow up, that's cancer prevention. Now your immune system has to be strong enough to take it out. So what are some of the foods that can do this? Well, before I tell you about the foods, let me tell you that I've been involved with drug development efforts, biotechnology drugs that have developed over a dozen anti-angiogenic, cancer-starving biotech treatments. All right, these are very sophisticated cancer drugs. It's a new category of cancer drug that the FDA identified, and you use it to treat colon cancer, brain cancer, liver cancer, kidney cancer, lung cancer. But I can tell you, why not use the same principle to prevent the cancer at the first place by turning the clock back and getting those microscopic cancers and preventing them from ever growing up. And that's where you can actually use food.
So are there foods that actually starve the cancer? Is that what you're talking about?
That's right. And that's what I've actually done my research on. Green tea, red grapes, garlic, red onions, dark chocolate, kale, leafy greens, seafood with a high omega-3 fatty acids.
Salmon, for example.
Salmon. But it even goes more than that, because most people think of salmon, but I encourage people who are adventurous to try other seafoods. Hake, black bass, Mediterranean sea bass. There's a whole range. Sardines, anchovies, herring, mackerel. There's a big range. And in my book, I actually publish lists of different fish that have omega-3 fatty acids, but also shellfish, manila clams, the New Zealand mussel, the things that you might have steamed on summer, like by the beach, are places that are foods that actually also contain healthy omega-3s. Now, here's an interesting thing about omega-3s that most people don't realize. They're like, like I'm into plant-based foods. I'm not into seafood. Well, guess what? The omega-3s actually originally come from a plant. It comes from algae. And the fish eat that algae, and then we eat the fish. So we ate what they ate, kind of thing.
Interesting.
So at the end of the day, it really still is the plant-based foods that are good for us. So sometimes people say to me, tell me what's the basic, just give me the take-home message of your whole book. All right. And what I say is that, there's so much science that is teaching us how to actually move forward to make better decisions for our health. But at the end of the day, it boils down to something that's pretty simple, and this has been shown study after study. The best foods for us that activate our health defenses tend to be plant-based foods. And the best way to eat them is to eat them whole, meaning you don't get them in a box or in a jar, but you actually eat and prepare them whole plant-based foods, fruits and vegetables, legumes, nuts and seeds. Healthy oils are better for us. Olive oil, omega-3 oils.
All of the good things that nutritionists have been promoting for quite a while. Fruits, vegetables, legumes.
That's right. And I'll tell you, nutritionists have been promoting that for a while, but here's what I want to introduce to your listeners. Chefs and people who really like to cook and like to eat, and cultures from the Mediterranean and Asia, people who are proud of their food, they've been promoting the same things, and they equate their food with health. So when we think about, like, why do we actually think about food being the things that we eat in America being not so good for us and like not good for our health? Well, think about it. Box food, we nuke them in the oven. They've got all these preservatives and chemicals in them, and then we drink a lot of soda, with artificial stuff in it, and there's lots of coloring. No wonder we don't think our food is good. But if you take a look at sort of like the basic principles, whole plant-based foods, fruits and vegetables, nuts and legumes, healthy oils, whole grains, and then put them in the hands of somebody who has a recipe. You don't have to be a star chef. You just have to be somebody who likes to cook in your own kitchen and make your own breakfast or throw together your own lunch. This is not rocket science, and it's not going to the Cordon Bleu, cooking culinary institute. It's really about just being in touch with our own body, recognizing that our eyes, our taste buds, our stomachs, please eat for enjoyment. You should love your food to love your health.
So I have a question regarding supplements. I don't think a lot of people don't know very much about lupus, for example, although it probably affects about 5 million people globally. Vitamin C, apparently this is a good, shall we say, fighter as far as lupus is concerned. But what about supplements themselves? Where do they fit in? Do they work? Are they nothing but coloring your urine? What's your take on that?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, let's sort of define what supplement means. The term supplement really means topping off, right? So if you're eating a normal, healthy diet, you might still be missing a few things, or you might not be getting enough of a few things. Like, for example, in the Northern Hemisphere, people who are light-skinned or where it's raining and gray all the time, you might not be getting enough sunlight. You might be deficient in vitamin D, even though you might be eating vitamin D in foods like mushrooms, for example. And so you could top off your health by having a vitamin D supplement. Okay. Omega-3 fatty acids, our bodies don't make omega-3s. We might get some healthy natural omega-3s from tree nuts, for example, but no, probably most of us don't eat enough tree nuts to really load up our omega-3s. Right. So we can top off with an omega-3 supplement. And I think that the reason people get confused is because some people actually mistake supplement as the way to get the main thing. What I always tell people is that eat a good, healthy diet that's full of tasty foods that are the healthy foods. And then if you think that you might be deficient in something, yeah, by all means, take a multivitamin, take a vitamin D, take an omega-3 to top yourself off. So supplements do work, but they're not intended to be the substitute for eating what's in the whole food, because the whole food will have much more than whatever has been manufactured into the dietary supplement. So you get, you might get, you get fibers, you get all these other bioactives, all the good stuff. Why miss out?
Right. Well, what about vitamin C? How do you feel about that?
Okay. So vitamin C is a very, very important vitamin when it comes to just general health. Our tissues, our cells need them. Like, we all know that the old story of the British sailors that had scurvy because they didn't have enough lemons and limes, or they didn't have enough fruit on their long sea voyages. So that's why they called them limeys. And that's why scurvy, the scurvy pirate kind of idea came about. And when they were able to supplement themselves on these long sea voyages with fruits, so this is not the pill supplement, they supplemented themselves with fruit on board, they were actually able to avoid scurvy. So vitamin C, very important for tissue health and healing. All right. Now, when it comes to a condition like lupus, which is an autoimmune inflammatory disease, where your body's inflamed because your own immune system is overactive and has figured out that there's something in your body that it wants to attack. It's kind of like having some people have pet dogs that, not that nice. And for some reason, the dog is always, growling and biting people in the house. That's a dog you don't want to keep very long. It could keep around too long because you can't, they're not a healthy part of the family. Well, that's what happens in lupus. Really, your own immune system is jacking itself up to attack you. And so those attacks cause inflammation, and that inflammation is what damages causes so much suffering. So, doctors can prescribe a steroid, which will calm down inflammation. And now the steroid will have other side effects that can be damaging.
Exactly.
Vitamin C is a natural anti-inflammatory that can calm down that guard dog, that attack dog in your body, that is your immune system that's kind of gone wild. And so this has been studied, by the way, in a number of different settings. But the one that I write about in my book comes from Miyagi, Japan, which is a prefecture in which there's a lot of women who actually have lupus. Lupus tends to affect women, and it causes a huge amount of suffering. And so a study was done in women where they looked at the women who were actually having more lupus flares versus less lupus flares, and they found that those women who ate more vitamin C containing foods actually had about a 70% decrease in their flares of lupus and their inflammatory markers were also lower. So eating foods that contain vitamin C, which is anti-inflammatory, can be beneficial by lowering the flares of lupus. So what are the foods containing vitamin C? Tomatoes, strawberries,
Oranges,
guava,
sure.
Oranges, citrus, red bell peppers. I mean, and look, if you just wanted to take a tablet of and done with it, that's fine. But think about all the goodness, all the fiber, all the other good stuff you can get from some of those foods, and you can integrate them into your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, or snack. That's what I'm talking about, is trying to take these things that are that can help what ails us and make it part of our life.
So what you're really saying is, aside from, supplements, if you absolutely need to supplement something, but by and large, everything you need can be found in food itself. Now, we're kind of running out of time, but I don't want to ignore your 5x5 framework that you get into in your book, and a couple of other things I want to ask you. Can you give us a description of this 5x5 framework and how this strategy really works in others?
Yeah. So in my book, Eat to Beat Disease, it's not a diet book, and I deliberately am just writing about teaching people about how your body can heal itself, and here are all the foods that do it. But people look for ways to actually implement it into their own life. So I made it as simple as possible. I call it 5x5x5. It's not a diet; it's a framework. It makes it easy for you to remember. You've got your body has 5 health defense systems. We talked about this. Your blood vessels, angiogenesis, your stem cells, your microbiome, your DNA, and your immune system. So one defense system for every finger of a hand. All right. And most of us actually eat about 5 times a day. We encounter food 5 times a day. Think about it. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe a couple of opportunities to snack. That's pretty typical. All right. 5 health defense systems, 5 time opportunities. And all we have to do is make 5 decisions every day when we encounter food to activate our health defenses. And so 5x5x5 is just making you aware that you got to do something for yourself. And there's 5 things to actually do every single day, every single time, every shot on goal we actually have for making a food decision is an opportunity to do something good for us. And because there's so many foods, you can actually choose from the things you already like.
Now, much of this, and I know you do online courses, and of course, we're going to talk about briefly your masterclass coming up in February. But as far as your online courses, are you still offering those where people can come and get this, in other words, one-on-one, obviously, shall we say, information? Obviously, they can read the book. And again, we're going to mention the title of your book and et cetera. But what about the online courses? Can you tell us how we get into those?
Yeah, well, first of all, I developed an online course, and I developed the idea of a free masterclass during the lockdown of the pandemic, when I started thinking about the fact that, the health system, the medical system can't aid us in this new situation when we were dealing with the beginning of the pandemic. There were no answers. There were no treatments. There were no drugs. There were hardly any tests even. And so we were all stuck by ourselves. And I realized that something that we could do for ourselves, because we all have to eat 3 times a day, is we could actually become better informed on how to support our body's own health defenses, including our immune system and our gut health, which then supports our immune system. And our gut is connected to our brain. And so we don't have to be so depressed and anxious. And, all of our health defenses come into play. And I realized that, here was an opportunity for me to share my knowledge in a way that could help people around the world during a time when doctors and hospitals were unable to provide anything. That was the origin story of my course. I launched it just at the beginning of this year, which is 2021. We're continuing it, and we're expanding it, we're increasing it. It's been so successful, by the way. I've had thousands of people from 38 countries join the course. And what is so refreshing and rewarding to me is to be able to see people around the world are all united by their desire to actually take their lives into their own hands and to make good decisions. So every other month I offer a course. Every other month I do a masterclass. Masterclass is free. Best way to find out about both, come to my website. It's at drwilliamlee.com, drwilliamlee.com. And if people want to follow me on social media, I'm at Dr. Dr. William Lee LI. You can find me everywhere. And one of the things that I do with my master classes and with my social media, and I encourage people to sign up for my newsletter. Just come to my website. Is that I actually release information continuously on new facts, new discoveries that can actually help you improve your life.
Well, again, Dr. Lee, I just want to repeat that the website. It's Dr. Dr. William Lee li.com. That's drwilliamlee.com. But also, Dr. Lee, we have our own website, which is bodymindsoulpodcast.net. And our listeners know that they can come there and also access your information, because we'll have your website posted. We'll have obviously a biography of yourself. And I really want to encourage, just in interviewing you today, not only do you have you given us a wealth of knowledge, but you're so articulate in the way you phrase things. And it just seems to me that it would be wise for some of our listeners who obviously to read the book, again, the book is Eat to Beat Disease, but in addition to the book, to take one of your online courses or your master class, which is coming up, I believe, in February, and we're going to be publicizing this again in February. But in any case, you're so articulate that I would imagine people will get so much from these online courses or from the master class. They're going to be able to absorb so much more. And over what period of time does a class last, just to give somebody a feel for it?
Oh, well, my course is actually a 4-week course. You do it in your own time. And there are modules that you watch with videos. It takes about 2 hours of watching. So I call it kind of like a couple of Netflix sessions, if you can devote towards learning about your health. And then my favorite part about doing the course is that every week I organize something called office hours. And it's just like office hours when you were in college and your professor outside of lecture opened the door and basically said, come on in, you can have a conversation and we can talk about something. We can either clarify something in the course or we can talk about some new stuff. And what I do is I actually appear live for 1 hour every single week. And I've got people from 38 countries that are all on a live session with me, where I talk about new information, and then we really do Q&A. It's a live opportunity to exchange things. If you can't make it and you're taking a course, no worries. That is recorded and is uploaded back to the course. So people who couldn't make it or who want to see it again can actually just go on and review it.
Excellent. So in other words, it's a 4-week course, but they can do it at their own leisure, whenever you have time to fit it in. But what valuable information. I really encourage our listeners, once again, to go to your website, drwilliamlee.com, or come to our website. And we're going to talk more about our website a little bit later after my nutritional tip of the day. But Dr. Lee, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's just absolutely amazing. I do hope you will consider one thing, and that is to somehow unite physicians to gather information about the foods their patients eat, primary care doctors in particular, and feed that into some sort of a database that can come up with information that would be so helpful. And I have a feeling you are the one to inspire this sort of thing to happen on a national basis. Just a FYI from my perspective.
No, thank you for making that suggestion. In fact, that's my mission in life, is actually to up the game of the medical community, because that's what people need, not just patients, but people who aren't sick yet and who don't want to be patients. And so that's really where I think I would be most satisfied to be able to see that happen. So thank you for that suggestion. And I will definitely be carrying that out.
Well, I hope so. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and you can get that ounce of prevention from your own food, correct? Eat to Beat Disease, Dr. William Li, the new science of how your body can heal itself. Dr. Li, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dr.
I'll be
Jim.
right back with my tip and after this message.
Be sure to visit our website for more information about how to access the site of Dr. William Li, where you'll find how to eat to beat disease, plus many other excellent podcasts and a wealth of health tips. Simply go to bodymindsoulpodcast.net. You'll find a wealth of great information. That's bodymindsoulpodcast.net. Now, back to our host, Dr. Jim Polikoff.
Unfortunately, we simply don't know when there's going to be an end to these dreaded COVID diseases. So if for some unknown reason you still are unvaccinated, please vaccinate now. And if you know of friends or family members, urge them to become vaccinated and get boosted. Booster shots, they're critically important as they can truly save your lives. So vaccinate and boost. Also, more than ever, proper nutrition and hydration are vital, particularly during this period of time. People who eat a well-balanced diet tend to be healthier with a stronger immune system. You've heard that from Dr. Li, the great advice he's been able to impart. Eat a variety of unprocessed foods. Lessen your intake of sugar and salt and fat. And again, read Dr. Li's book. I guarantee you it's a masterpiece, Eat to Beat Disease. And in terms of your immune system, I personally take 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C each day. Now, that doesn't mean you should. It only means that that's something that I do because I do believe that it has helped me in terms of my immune system. But as Dr. Li said, you can gain this immunity without taking any type of supplements, really, if you eat the right foods. So again, I'm sorry to keep being repetitious on this, but Dr. Li's book, Eat and Beat Disease, is really something that certainly surpasses this wellness tip that I'm giving you. So again, we thank Dr. Li for his valuable information. Be sure to read his book once again, Eat to Beat Disease, and come to our website, which is bodymindsoulpodcast.net. And you'll be able to pick up information about Dr. Li, but also so many other podcasts and tips, health tips that you can have, and also get regular checkups and ask your doctor what's best for you and encourage your doctor to discuss foods with you. This is Dr. Jim Polikoff, and I thank you for joining me during this informative episode. Again, be sure to visit us at bodymindsoulpodcast.net, and we'll see you at the next episode.